Hello everyone, this is Shlok, and with the CMAT right around the corner, I wanted to summarize all my learnings about the CMAT exams from the mocks that I've taken, and we'll be discussing what kind of sections are there in the CMAT, what should be our time allocation, our time management, and our overall strategy for us to get close to the 95th or the 99th percentile. And the goal today is for us to also understand the score versus percentiles and what kind of colleges that we can get at those percentiles. So without further ado, let's get started. So in the first part of the video, we look at the score versus percentiles that the CMAT exam has seen over the last couple of years, so 2023 and 2024. And our first threshold is 95th percentile. And the reason why I haven't, taken in 90 percentile or any of the lower thresholds is because there aren't many great colleges which you unlock at those percentiles. And at the 95th percentile, you unlock KJ Somaiya, you unlock Great Lakes Institute of Management, you unlock GIM. So those are some of the good colleges that CMAT has to offer. At 270 marks, you see the 99th percentile on the CMAT. At 300 marks, you see the 99.5th percentile. So these better percentiles, they really help you unlock or improve your chances in converting the calls that you get. And then finally we have 340 plus marks, which gets you 99.99 percentile, which unlocks the holy grail, which is JBIM, as a highly prestigious institute, but again very very difficult to get that percentile as well. So that's a little overview about the score versus percentile that we have been seeing over the last couple of years. So without further ado, let's get started into what are the different kinds of sections and how we can go about approaching each one of those sections. So over the mocks that I've taken, I really like approaching the quant and the DI section first. And the reason for that is the quant and the DI section is one of those few sections where you will definitely have an answer and you can bet your life on those answers, because the other sections, they have a little bit of an ambiguity when marking the answer. So this is the first one where I get a very good momentum, a very good start. And I mostly refrain from commenting on the difficulty level of any particular section, but I genuinely believe that the questions are much easier. When I say much easier, I genuinely mean they are much easier from what we have been seeing on the snap, on the nmat, on the cat, and on the zat. And this is definitely a notch below that, and there is no added time pressure also. So this is the best of all worlds. You get easy questions and you get more time to solve them. So this is one very important aspect about the quant and the DI section of the CMAT. After that, my first very important tip here is to allocate 40 minutes. I allocate 40 minutes to the section, and my goal is to get 80 marks. My goal is to get, and I've done that a couple of times, to get each one of the questions right in the quant section of the CMAT. Of course, there in a few mocks that I've taken, 2 or 3 questions were a little bit tricky, and but still our goal still remains about 70 marks should be our minimum threshold that we should aim in the CMAT quant section. After that, we have only one set in the data interpretation, so that is a great thing for someone who is not very fond of DI sets, and that is one thing, important thing to note. After that, we have certain recurring themes, a couple of questions that I've seen coming a lot of times, which is we have to arrange surds in an increasing order. So you need to know how we can do that. And finally, we also need to understand that what are duplicate ratios, what are compound ratios. So some of the theory that is attached to quants is also very very important. The second section that I like to attempt is the logical reasoning section, and the reason that I do that is because, again, this section also offers us a lot of surety when marking the answers, and we can be reasonably sure, about 90% sure, when we are marking any particular answer. So the first thing I want to talk about is I again allocate 40 minutes to this section. Again, this has also 20 questions, and my goal is to get about 60 marks, and I try to attempt at least 16 to 17 questions in this particular section. And this has a lot of recurring themes from the snap and the nmat. It has a lot of critical reasoning in the form of assumption questions, in the form of strength and weaken questions, in the form of questions which ask you whether this particular argument is strong or it is weak. So that becomes a very important part. And again, I have recommended the CR Bible many times to improve your CR skills, which is again something that I would recommend for you to do for this particular exam as well. After that, we look at a cheat sheet. Yeah, cheat sheet becomes super relevant, that you can make in the time before the exam starts. And even if you do not get any time before the exam starts, you have ample amount of time in this exam. You can create a cheat sheet even while the exam is going on. So the cheat sheet is mostly, write all the alphabets from A to Z and write the numbers corresponding to it, and also a mirror image coding. So for example, what I've written down below, from A to M, and then in reverse order from N to Z. And the kind of questions that might come from the reverse order coding could be something like A corresponds with Z, M corresponds with N, and F corresponds with U or V, or something like that, of that sort. So this cheat sheet becomes very important. In addition to that, I also make a little diagram that shows me the different directions: north, west, south, east, southwest, northeast, and so on. So that really helps me out, and it creates zero confusion when questions based on directions come in the paper. After that, finally, we have section is a medium difficulty section. The section is a tad bit more difficult than the quant section of the CMAT, but definitely this is still very much doable compared to what we have seen in the CAT, the SNAP, and so on. The next section that we see is the language comprehension. Again, for me personally, this comes out to be a very, very easy section, because this section has a lot of vocabulary, a lot of grammar. It has only one RC, and that too is a very short one. So I really enjoy this section, and again, a very easy section for me. So allocate 20 minutes to this section. The goal is to get 60 marks. 60 marks is again 16 to 17 attempts. Some of the questions of grammar are slightly more technical, which I mostly let go. So that is why I'm not able to score full in this particular section. After that, yeah, be thorough with parts of speech. You might get questions on any kind of, identified nouns, identify verbs, identify adverbs. And one very important thing I wanted to highlight about adverbs: people think that adverbs only modify verbs, but that is not true. Adverbs also modify other adjectives, adverbs modify other verbs, as we already know, but adverbs modify other adjectives as well. And adverbs, I think, modifies one more part of speech as well, which I'll have to look through. But be careful about adverbs, very important. But there is only one RC, which is also pretty short. I've already talked about that. Very good for people who don't like reading long RCs. After that, yeah, certain recurring themes: grammar, super important for the CMAT. Vocabulary, something you cannot develop over a course of a week, but still, if you have a sort of a word list, you might want to refer to that. We have idioms, again, not easy to develop that over a weekend. Then we have fill in the blanks, very, very doable. You don't need to worry about the fill in the blanks. Section difficulty is pretty easy in my opinion. GK, I think this is the most dreaded section for me, because this section does not even have a lot of it does not even have a lot of current affairs. There is mostly about 90% of the section is static GK, and static GK is basically GK that is not current, it is historical facts. So that is something that I do not really like about this exam, that the GK section is slightly more difficult. In fact, it is very difficult in my opinion. And go through all the important dates. For example, one of the questions that I've seen is arrange the dates in a chronological order in the year. For example, they give you 5 dates, and the dates are sort of like Independence Day, Children's Day, Yoga Day, Youth Day, and so on. So you have to organize them in a way that which one comes first in the year. You have to organize them that way. So having an idea of those important dates really helps. And the goal is to get 20 marks. 20 marks is just 5 questions correct, which I think is very, very doable. If you get more than 5 questions correct, all the better for you. Then we allocate 10 minutes to the GK section, because in the first round of the paper solving, we just go through everything and anything and everything that we get in the first go. So that's a little bit about the GK section. Next, we have a section that is fairly unique to the CMAT, which is the innovation and the entrepreneurship section. And here we allocate about 20 minutes. We have 20 questions, and my goal is about 12 to 15 questions, and I mostly get around 50 marks in this particular section. And it is a mix of GK and theories related to business. So my advice to anyone from the commerce stream is to brush up their textbooks of 11th and 12th in the business studies subject, and that should really help you out in getting the basics that you already have ingrained, to brush them up for this particular exam. And the section difficulty is a medium level difficulty, and I've seen certain themes that are recurring. For example, there are pricing models, there are government schemes related to funding of SMEs. There were a lot of questions that talk about mudra loans, that talk about smile loans, and so on. So knowing about these government schemes becomes fairly important. After that, we have a bunch of questions on design thinking, and that I think is a very, very important topic. I'll be discussing, definitely making a more detailed video on entrepreneurship and innovation, so please stay tuned for that. And additionally, we also have I've seen a few questions that talk about the process of starting a business. So for example, you first do a feasibility analysis, you create a business plan, then you go about procuring your raw materials, then you go about implementing your business plan, which is getting a space to process your raw material, creating your finished goods, and then you go about marketing them and selling them. So you need to have a brief overview of the business processes, and you need to understand what is the steps that one has to encounter and one has to follow when they are starting their own business. So that's a little bit about the innovation and the entrepreneurship section. Finally, for some parting thoughts, I wanted to say that this one is a long exam, but it is not as strenuous as the ZAT. It would not keep you occupied for 180 minutes. As I've already discussed, the plan that we have made, it will only take about 2 hours and 10 minutes at most. And after those 2 hour 10 minutes are over, you'd still have 50 minutes and you'd be done with almost everything that you knew that you could have answered in the paper. So you still have those 50 minutes in order to go back to the questions that you thought you could do, but you couldn't do in the first particular lab. But in the second lab, you should definitely go for that. And one pro tip over here is that use the mark for review feature very effectively, wherein you can mark some of the questions that you could do but weren't able to do in the first lab, and you can also mark some other questions that you think you have done properly, but you would still again want to check them for hygiene, for just as a hygiene factor. So please do that as well, because you have ample time in this paper, and and in the GK section as well, you should revisit questions and think about if there is anything you can gather that you couldn't immediately gather. For example, many a times when we see a particular question that we weren't able to get in the first go, we can always return to it and try to remember facts that we can now, since we already knew that question. So the subconscious mind, as I've already talked about is in one of my previous videos, when you already know a particular question and then you return to that question later on, your subconscious mind has already had a chance to work on it, and when you return to that question, the question becomes a lot more easier and palatable. So that is one very important tip. So the paper is very long, so be sure to use your time effectively, and do not just let go of the paper. Let's say you are done in 2 hours 20 minutes and now you have 40 minutes remaining in hand. Try to use the most of that time in order to keep on going back to the questions and make sure there are no little smallest errors that you've made, because this paper is as a function of it being easy. The good colleges are only at the higher percentile, so you need to maximize the scores. And one last thing I wanted to talk about is that the plan that I've talked about should help you get to about a 270 plus score, which is a great percentile, a 99th percentile on the CMAT. So that should help us get great colleges. And I personally am not gonna write the CMAT. I just took a few mocks so that I could discuss about it and talk about it, and I'm personally going to take the MyCat on that particular day. So that's a little bit about my journey as well, and I hope you got a chance to learn something from this video. And thank you so much for watching till the end, and have a great day ahead. Bye bye.